This is AUGforums.com Real Talk. First, thank you to our sponsors, APS Payments, Kenzium, and Velixo. You can learn more about how our sponsors work with Acumatica by going to augforums.com/sponsors. My name is Tim Rodman, and I'm coming to you live on Monday, September 14th, 2020. This is episode 24, an Acumatica customer story with Netesh Gohil, VP of Operations at Cesco Lighting. And Netesh, I'll let you go ahead and start off by introducing yourself.
Thank you, Tim. So as you said, my name is Netesh Gohil. I've been working at Cesco Lighting now for about 2.5 years. My career has gone all over the place. I used to work for a CAD company, software company in Boston, to Philips Lighting, managing ERP implementations at Philips Lighting. Now I'm at Cesco. I'm trying to put in my experience on just streamlining the operations here, and one of those things has to do with when I joined, getting Acumatica up and running and live.
Awesome. And so the business, the Cesco Lighting business, if you can, what kind of ballpark annual revenue and number of employees are you at?
Sure. Well, before I go, Cesco Lighting, we're a sales company. We're like a manufacturer's representative in the lighting industry. And so we rep about, I think, around 150 different manufacturers. So we're their sales arm. And as a company, we have around, I would say around 300 employees, just like south of 300 employees. And from a sales standpoint, I would say we're north of $250 million of sales in lighting year over year.
That's pretty good size. That's awesome.
Yeah, I wish I could take more credit, but it's not me. It's the sales team.
And you mentioned in your background, you had some ERP experience prior to getting involved with Cesco and Acumatica. Maybe you could walk us through a little bit some of that, specific products and things that you work with.
Absolutely. I think through my career, I've worked with a number of companies, basically managing solutions, and the most notably last one was Philips Lighting before I joined Cesco Lighting. Philips Lighting is a manufacturer, and at Philips, they used SAP, and I think one of the biggest challenges was implementing SAP for Philips North America. At that time, I managed what's called pricing and quotations for Philips Lighting North America, and was really helpful, or trying to help rather, migrate the company onto the SAP ERP system for all of these transactions, pricing records, master data, customer data, vendor data. And so from that standpoint, it taught me a lot about ERP systems, the challenges that come in, and not only with the actual products themselves, but the biggest thing that happens in these implementations is, in my opinion, the change management that the organization needs to go through the whole, what we all in air quotes would say, the journey.
Yeah, no, I totally agree that the biggest part of it is the people, not the software, right? The
Absolutely.
Important part of it. So that, I assume at Philips, name like Philips, when you say SAP, you don't mean SAP Business One, you mean the big SAP ERP product.
That's correct. Yeah, the I don't know what you want to call it. The big product that has, let's say, far-reaching tentacles in every aspect of the business. I mean, once you get in there and you do it, it's difficult. But at some point, I would like to claim that there was some success there. That once we got it and it was running and it was, it's pretty predictable. And I mean, the goal of my role at any organization I've been with, in that sense, would be to build something that's predictable and repeatable. And from an operations standpoint, and that comes not only from training the people, but also having the right software and the pervasiveness of the software, not only with the functionality, but also the master data and so forth to make it work.
So in your role at Cesco, did you run the point on that, or were you just a piece of the implementation?
Yeah, so when I joined 2.5 years ago, the funny story is Cesco has been one of the, let's say, some of the longer customers of Acumatica. Unfortunately, we were always in this mode of not being live, and at some point, unfortunately, for negative, it's a joke a little bit because when users or employees always talk about this project, it was met with some sort of preconceived bias of, oh yeah, we know we have it, we're still in that process. And when I joined, I think the realization came from the management team that they need somebody to run point. And I think the benefit I had was being in the lighting industry and understanding, and I already had a relationship with Cesco Lighting, coming to Cesco Lighting, understanding the business and being able to take my side of it, which is more on the software side through my experience, allowed me to run point in a way to really work with our partner in an extremely, let's say, more efficient way. And I think our partner has been great. But until then, most of the people involved in the project, it was a hobby versus their sole function in the beginning.
That's a good way of describing it. A hobby versus, I guess, taking it seriously enough to get you live.
Yeah,
I like
and I
that
think,
hobby word.
yeah. Well, as a company, Cesco, we're a sales company. So at the end of the day, we're only making money as an entity when we're selling something. So either you're on the sales force and you're out there trying to build relationships and close the sale, or you're in the inside supporting the team. And so in that sense, I think they took a risk there of having a role like myself come in and kind of managing the operations from, let's say, making things more efficient on the day to day. But this was my primary kind of managing the operations from, let's say, making things more efficient on the day to day. But this was my primary priority and job function. And I think that gave me a sense of focus in that I didn't have to worry about the day to day transactions.
And what system was Cesco running prior to Acumatica?
So Cesco, with the number of employees we have around 14 different branches all around the Southeast, a number of divisions in our company, and all of them were using a lighting kind of customized homegrown quote engine. And then our accounting teams, who obviously need to track our money, was using like Great Plains. And so the challenge is there whether the systems didn't talk to each other in an effective way. So there was a heavy amount of customization and honestly
A lot of Microsoft Excel going on there then, huh?
Yeah, it's like, I think best laid plans go awry. The company, Cesco, has been extremely successful through their 50-year history. And as a company, we've moved so fast sometimes, you tend to grow sometimes faster than your processes can evolve. And I think they did what needed to be done at those times. And I think it's just one of those things where we had some growing pains. And I think, timing is everything. Joining the company when I did, we're in a very unique position now that we're live, that we're the first time we have complete an enterprise system with transparency, actually what I would call an unprecedented transparency in the system.
So before we go into the Acumatica side of it, I'll just say that I think that story is very common. As much as people who are in a multi-year implementation having trouble getting focus on it, it's as much as people who are in a multi-year implementation having trouble getting focus on it, etc. They feel like, we must be the only ones like this. But I think it's unfortunately a very common story. And at a certain point, you either cut ties or you find a way to work through it, right? It sounds like you guys worked through it, which is awesome. Maybe you could share some advice to someone who's in that situation, is in the middle of implementing Acumatica, but they feel like maybe they're stuck. What are some of the key things you found that help get you to the finish line?
Sure. So our partner, Anthony Thomas Consulting, gotten to work with them now for, like I said, 2.5 years. They were in the middle of this the whole time. And working with them, and the hard part is, in any project that I've ever experienced, you always have these sort of plateaus, I guess, in progress. And I think One of the biggest things we really had an honest conversation around was, are we really looking at customizing Acumatica, and how do we make the balance between the customization we require and really leveraging the functionality out of the box? And I know it sounds really simple, but those are some tough decisions that happen. I mean, sometimes you're making trade-offs in favor of customization when, the analogy, and I think they're probably sick of me if they're going to listen to this, the analogies I use is sometimes I don't need the Ferrari. Sometimes a lesser car will get me there. And, we don't have to have best in class in every possible business process, but, leveraging base functionality can get us faster. And it's okay to adopt a different, unique business process if the software out of the box can do it. And I think we've had a lot of those, what I call courageous conversations, where we're sitting around a room or on the phone arguing, and really with very heated information. But the best thing was that we can come out of there with something better.
What do you think are some of the key questions? Like for me, one of the key questions for a process is, how often does this happen? Is it something that happens every day? Is it something that happens once a month? Is it 20% of the transactions, or is it 80%? But what are some of the key questions for you that you use to drill in and decide, is this something that needs to be customized, or is it something that we can use, maybe something that's not exactly what we want, but it's at least in the core product? How are some of the ways you get to deciding
Right.
which way you're going to?
Yeah, and I think so. Again, leveraging my experience, I used to be in software when I was at the CAD company managing requirements, and I approached the same thing where it's, along with the frequency of what somebody's bringing up, I really attempt to look at what everybody brings up as a symptom, if you will, and really trying to understand the root cause, or really the question I get down to when I'm talking to the end user on my team is, what are you really trying to do? And by understanding what they're really trying to do, I can help translate what we're going to ask our partner to go do. And I think that's where not only is it a frequency, but when we start evaluating the core essence of the work or the process and even the steps, it helps me understand and relay the right information to our partner to help decide what functionality is it, the customization route or out of the box. Because there's a lot of people who have their lens on an issue on a new software because of what they're used to in the incumbent software. And I think sometimes, we're so, at the end of the day, if I've learned anything in my career, is that people don't like change. And I understand that, and I have to work with that. And I think at times a lot of, people in terms of roles and functions will explain what they're doing today in terms of menu picks and clicks. And I think it's our job in leaders in this organization to understand why they're doing those steps, because frankly, you have the luxury of making this change and there could be a better way. And I think what that's allowed us to do is really explore out of the box solutions, maybe some customizations, but sell it internally as well. Because if you use out of the box, you immediately get some other things for free. Where if you go down the customization, the idea is that Acumatica is a pretty powerful piece or platform. And I think at the end of the day, you really want to understand not only what you're asking it to, but why, and what are those next two steps you're trying to do to really understand the ramifications of the decision to go with out of the box versus customization.
I like that. Yeah, so you're drilling in and you're asking the why, and I think that's a delicate conversation, that you're not asking the why saying that it's not needed. You're asking it curiously, right? And how you get someone to join you in that journey and not resist you on that journey is a real skill to do. But you have to drill in, you have to get into the processes, and that's, in your opinion, a key piece of advice to how you actually get someone live. And that to how you actually get someone live. And that I would assume that in that process, you're drawing a line between what has to be had versus the have to have and the wants. But you're not just drawing a line to say we're either doing this or we're not doing this. You're also drawing a line to decide what you're doing for go live versus what you might do in a future phase, I assume. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And I think, we all call it different things, but back in before we went live, we had the infamous punch list, right? And then what I used to always challenge our partner in Anthony Thomas Consulting was, give me the reasons why we can't go live today. And we would have that list. And then we'd have continuous conversations where, do we really need this to go? I know at some point you have to set a date, and we have to be accepting that, we're not going to get everything right. We have to be accepting that, we're not going to get everything right. But what do we learn from anything that didn't go right? What can we mitigate? What can we do? Like you said, prioritize for the point release, like release 1.1 or 1.2 or whatever it is internally. But all of those decisions have to be made in concert. And I think I said at the beginning, the biggest challenge in these implementations is change management. It's about stakeholder management, is understanding who needs to be aware of the challenges you're facing and what team members you need to really have rallied by your side to kind of be those thought leaders. Because when you go live, people will look to other champions, and you got to make sure you bring them all along in the bus.
And on that point, it's a team effort to implement any ERP system. When you're having those conversations about the various business processes, when you're developing that punch list, how do you document that? Other than just having a list of things, that there's some other ways that you use to communicate with the team outside of meetings. Do you actually use a business process documentation tool, or what are some of those documents that you use in the process?
Well, Anthony Thomas, I'm going to refer to them as ATC. It's the shorter way of saying their name. But so they set up I forget the name of the tool, but it was an online tool that kind of captured all the requirements. Unfortunately, with license restraints, they had, to share them internally, and we turned them into spreadsheets. And we used Office 365 to share the spreadsheets in a location. And I think what we saw was, there was a core set of people that needed to understand all of what the punch list was. But to keep everybody on the same page, let's say at the employee level, we started holding, I think it was every other week. So every 2 weeks, you would have what we called a forum for this software, where we would, I think it was every other week. So every 2 weeks, you would have what we called a forum for this software, where we would showcase for the different functions, the functionality. And then up until we went live, it was almost like a training session and a showcase session. And then shortly after we went live, we started calling them Feature Fridays. And we had every other week, again, with distinct modules. And we would hold it through a Teams meeting where the first 30 minutes was me walking through functionality, describing what we've built or what's in the point release. And the last 30 minutes was an open forum where the employees and the users of the software could ask any question they would want, and we would try to answer it. And all of these sessions were recorded and hosted, so anybody missing it also could use it as a library of information. And we then complemented all of that with at least what we tried, as you can imagine, Tim, written documentation is always a challenge, because as you keep.
So those Fridays, that happened after go live, or were you doing that even during the implementation process?
During the implementation, we had these like round table forums, because we're still, if you think about it, before implementation, or before we went live rather, we're still in like a training mode and almost evaluating the design approach, getting feedback and small enhancements. And then after we go live, it was more, we switch those to be more of, here's what we've built and here's how you do it. And then using those forms to kind of switch kind of the messaging there.
But you pretty much kept it every week or two, you were having that forum.
Absolutely. We thought by, our vision was, by having a predictable time, almost became like something where people had just expected, okay, at Fridays at 2, it almost became like something where people had just expected, okay, at Fridays at 2 o'clock, I expect to get on. If I need to get on it, I know it's recorded, but it was always that kind of time slot where people could rely on having this kind of forum to kind of share questions and information.
I like that. Yeah, communication, that's such a great way to communicate on the project and make it feel like it's not something happening in a dark room somewhere that only a few people know about. A lot of it, to me, the more transparent the process is, the more likely you are to get buy-in from people. So I really like that approach.
Yeah, and I think sometimes we had some success with it, but I mean, in the spirit of going fast, I'll be brutally honest with that. Sometimes I am sitting in my office making some decisions too, but I'm trying to make as much as we can communicate out there as possible and trying to also balance that with speed, you know. It's always the challenge. It's what we do in facing on a project like this.
And you still got to have those one-on-one conversations, right? My experience, when you have the big team phone calls, a lot of times you don't hear the problems as much as when you're on a one-on-one phone call. Someone knows no one else is listening, and that's when you start hearing a little bit more what the problems really are. Has that been your experience?
Absolutely. I think what we do in these, a canned answer I have to a lot of people is, wow, that's a really interesting question. I don't know the answer, but let me contact you later and let's share screens and go through it in detail. And those are the ones where you get that rich information from that user where they show you something they're trying to do. When you get to you understand what they're doing, then they show you the 3 other things they're going to do as a result of that activity. And then you can start piecing it together and going, well, wait a minute. If we take a step back and use this approach, not only do I answer their point question, but I enable them to do the other 2 things in a faster, more effective way. And that to me is one of the biggest wins we've had in this project.
I like that. That's awesome. You didn't just swap out systems, but you took the company to a place that they weren't before and made things better. That's huge.
Absolutely. And that's where, and it's been rocky. Like I can imagine a lot of customers who are going to listen to this, we've all gone through those ups and downs. And, we've had our own share of, sessions with our relationship managers at Acumatica themselves, and we're questioning a lot of our approaches here. But we're on the other side now, and I get, Tim, the luxury is being able to get on something like this now, and being on this side is a lot easier.
I'm sure the pain is not as immediate, right? It's more maybe a numbed pain at this point.
Yeah. Well, the funny story I like to think about is I write everything down in a notebook. So if you ever see me at these conferences, I'm always writing in a notebook. But I keep all my notebooks, and I joke around that I look at the notebook I had 1 year ago and some of the things I wrote down, and I'm looking at them now laughing, goes, I remember when that was my latest thing to look at. And now I'm on this side of it going, wow, 1 year made a lot of difference.
Maybe you were writing in more capital letters a year ago, and now it's toned down a little bit.
Yeah, probably.
So when you got involved 2.5 years ago, it sounds like when you first got involved with Cesco Lighting, the implementation had already started. Is that correct?
Yeah, they were probably in more of the design and kind of proof of concept phase. Cesco Lighting has definitely different requirements than most companies, I think, have with Acumatica. As I mentioned, we don't actually make anything. We're a sales company, functionality in Acumatica. And so when I joined, they were still in a proof of concept, like starting implementation. And, my sense on anything is I like to get in the weeds. And what I did was I immediately got access to the training curriculums and started just going through and trying to understand out of the box what I can do, and took some different approaches and really tried to implement my view, which was let's question everything. And instead of jumping to customization, how much can the base functionality do?
So you got live. What month did you go live, and what Acumatica modules did you go live with?
So we based our implementation off the distribution module. And we went live officially August of last year. And what we did was we implemented what I call a soft rollout with those 14 branches. We actually had a core team of people travel to each branch. This is all pre-COVID, obviously. Travel to each branch, sit with the end users there, really walk them through a from to of what they're using today at that point in time to what they're going to be using. And through that process, really try to enable them to move off and obviously give them time, because obviously our main goal is we can't compromise sales. And so all the branches were officially on the new platform as of Jan 1 this past beginning of this year.
So from August 2019 to January 2020, you did a phased rollout through the different branches.
That's correct.
Interesting.
And,
I'm curious how
divisions.
Okay. So the Acumatica word for that would be, for you guys, did you wind up with one company with multiple branches and one tenant, or what would the structure look like?
Yeah, so we have one tenant, one company. We have the multi-branch configuration. So they all roll up for the most part into one company right now.
Okay. And is it, this might be too detailed, but I always like, this is one of the fundamental configuration points you have to decide on. I'm curious if it's those branches, are they requiring balancing where you can wind up with multiple balance sheets, or is it just not requiring balancing?
That I'm not too sure about, Tim. I wouldn't want to make a guess on that without knowing. I know my counterpart on the accounting side has been handling that, our CFO.
Okay.
And so I don't know off the top of my head that specific answer.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, I'm more the accountant side. That's why I drill into that stuff. But
Yeah,
I like
I'm on
that.
the opposite.
That's interesting that you phased in the branches and you were successful with that. I know sometimes that's a head. I'm more the accountant side. That's why I drill into that stuff. But
Yeah,
I like
I'm on
that.
the opposite.
That's interesting that you phased in the branches and you were successful with that. I know sometimes that's a headache on the accounting side, but it sounds like you were able to pull that off. That's good news.
Yeah, so far so good. I know in our accounting side of implementation now is we chose to do is all the operation side first. If you remember, I said there was this quotations ordering tool that was a legacy lighting system on all the branches. We've harmonized that into one enterprise footprint of Acumatica. And then our accounting side is still on Great Plains and will be migrating by the end of the year.
Ah, okay. So your initial implementation, when you say distribution, it really was only distribution, not the finance side of things.
That's correct. Yeah. So we're in the middle letters now on the accounting side. We have a couple, we have some things that we really need from a lighting agent perspective that we're getting in there, and we're close. We're really close. I think, our goal, we've had several deadlines, but I believe by the end of the year, we'll be all on one system, which has never been the case at Cesco, which again, is the thing I guess I was brought in to help do, and we're close. So I'm kind of excited about that.
So I like that. I know it's challenging phasing in branches from an accounting standpoint, so I like that approach of you phase them in, you just do the operational side, keep your existing accounting system, especially in a sales organization where, like you said, salespeople are so motivated, everything is driven by the sale. The back office system is the last priority. So you get through that, which is a longer process. Then once you've got all the branches using that, now you can bring in the finance. I like that approach. Yeah,
it's one of those things where, when I first joined, if you go timelines, within the first, we questioned even that when I first came in, and as a management team then felt like it was the right choice. So, you kind of cross that off the list and then move forward and say, okay, how do we make this work?
So as a manufacturer's rep, the distribution modules to you, is it primarily just the sales orders, or are you actually tracking inventory somehow? How's that working?
So what we do is the customization we built really revolves around a concept. Like, we looked at the projects as part of the construction module, but we kind of morphed our own projects. And we do a lot of quotations. So Cesco is all about providing quotations on projects. and then tracking the ecosystem around that quotations package and a lot of our quote strategies, and then we turn those into um, basically orders, and then having orders on behalf of the rep to the manufacturers. And then a big activity at Cesco is tracking all of those orders, because every manufacturer gives us that information in different ways. And then our model is basically owning that information, because we are the point contact for the contractor or distributor who's placing the order. We're that kind of, I don't know if it translates well, but the one throat to choke on any job if you need to know what's going on with the shipments and coordinating the construction project.
Interesting. For other manufacturer reps out there, I'm curious to dive in on that. That's what you customize. So it sounds like you did not use, it almost sounds like that could be CRM, not even projects, but CRM opportunities.
And I think it was promising. And I think at some point what we decided, though, was our implementation already had started with a new kind of entity type around projects, or we call them projects, that we started adding a lot more info to, because it's really important in our business to understand the lighting designers, architects, specifiers, contractors, general contractors, electrical contractors, distributors. So we needed to build it in a way that allowed us to quickly identify patterns and teams and, relationships we have in different pieces of the project, and then build a quotes tool off of that. Because the quotes tool, there was a lot of requirements we had in quotations that we had to customize to make our quotes work with what the industry, at least in our industry at least, they expect to see on quotes.
I see. So kind of you actually built the rules of that quotation engine into Acumatica, the workflow of it.
Some workflow, but some of it's just like, and one of the customizations I'm really happy with on the quote side was live subtotals. So a lot of times when we're giving a quotation for a project, we have the building shell, like a site. You can imagine a campus site where they have one building and then a different building, and we can on one quote now have the different buildings organized with all the different products with live subtotals in the doc detail screen, without having to go to some other screen to see what those totals are.
Interesting.
And it's
and that's a custom screen. That quote screen, that's an entirely unique
no, we
screen
built
to
the
use.
customization in the doc details. So, but it is a customization. Yes, sorry about that.
Oh, but the doc details is on the regular Acumatica quote screen?
Yeah. So as somebody
okay.
types in different lines and they add a subtotal, it gives in the doc details. So, but it is a customization. Yes, sorry about that.
Oh, but the doc details is on the regular Acumatica quote screen?
Yeah. So as somebody
okay.
types in different lines and they add a subtotal, it gives them the live subtotal for that section. They create a blank line. So one of the things we can't do easily, like insert blank lines into a quote, we did that. So we can have some clear separation. It almost gives you, from a software view, I called it WYSIWYG, like what you see is what you get. So that as you keep building this quote, and when you output it, it's exactly what you expected on your entry.
Cool. So without having to keep printing it and then going back to the data entry screen.
Yeah. So a lot of times,
right there.
Right there, and then we created the outputs all show up in different tabs now, so that we can stay focused. The user stays focused on their quote. Different tabs are generated with the outputs, so that you're never taking your focus off the initial screen.
A few extra fields, but for
Absolutely.
the most part, is it the same core?
It's the same. That's one of the key things. We tried to use the same sort of mechanism there to turn, well, we use the copy order function because our quotes were built off of sales orders of a custom type called Cesco quotes. And by then copying that, we turn it into a custom order that can be transacted through purchase orders using out-of-the-box functionality.
And then on the relation side, you mentioned talking about the different entities and how they're related. Did you do anything custom there, or just the regular relations tab?
No, we did custom because we needed to carry that object all the way through, because we wanted to understand, where if we give quotes to 5 different entities, which one wins, which one doesn't, and build some correlation there based on orders and projects and quotes.
Interesting. So project for you is an Acumatica language. That's the custom order type, or when you said a new
No,
entity, or
it's a new,
what's that
we
type?
built a new data class called projects. Um, so we partnered with not only ATC put us in with Fiduciasoft, and they're another company on the development side, and we built this entity to be the end all be all of an object that we track. So a project can have, like if I'm doing a project at University of Florida, we used um, one project could be, let's say, the stadium lighting, and then all of the aspects, they may have multiple releases, so all of the orders and everything tied to that project is always lumped into that one master project view. But I may be there over 2 years with multiple quotes and orders and change orders and anything, but it's all, we wanted to build the structure that I could look at the profitability of the project as a whole. Look at the profitability of the project as a whole.
I see.
And so
And none of that is using the projects module in Acumatica.
that's correct. Yeah. And I mean, that's where I think anybody who knows maybe more would be like, oh, why didn't you guys just use this? But I think at that time in our journey through this thing, it was the best decision for us. And so far it's paid off. So, but it's interesting to see some of the new functionality coming out too. So.
Yeah, the more you get into the details, the more I can see that process of having to decide, well, what are we going to customize versus what are we going to live with?
Right.
That makes a lot of
sense.
So what other unique things sounds like the quoting was the main thing. What other things did you need to customize?
Well, one of the bigger things is on the purchase order side, the way we track orders. So because we get information from 150 different manufacturers and they all do it different ways and portals, and we tried using the receipt approach, but found that receipts on purchase orders are more of a finance thing and not so much didn't have really flexibility that we need on the order side, because sometimes, the information we get is wrong. We have to make corrections, and we tried doing the receipts thing and had to stop it because we couldn't modify released receipts and things like that. And so what we did was we customized and built a new tracking mechanism just for the operations team on how to track shipments, we had estimated ship dates, actual ship dates, tracking numbers, carriers. And we built this sort of customization that sits on next to the purchase order in a way that lets me modify, all of that information real time so I could see it, but then also let us do some mass update screen for all shipping, because as I said, we rep so many manufacturers that I want to update shipping info across multiple orders for the same manufacturer. Now I have one screen that I could use to kind of filter the view I want, edit all that information, and then just hit update. And what it actually does is it passes all that shipping info individually to all of the orders and their individual order tracking. And that's been one of the biggest improvements in our business process at Cesco.
So it sounds to me like your purchase order is the end of it, and maybe you're just updating statuses and additional custom fields on the purchase order lines themselves without actually creating a purchase receipt, or how does that work?
Yeah, so right now, as I mentioned, our accounting team and finance team isn't on yet. And so that last piece of the puzzle is everything you're talking about for order tracking in our world is just a status change from an operations person on this order. And then what we're chosen to do is go back and remove the customization so that when our finance team comes on, they're going to use native functionality in Acumatica to turn receipts into the actual finance doc that then allows for the trigger to hit AR and things like that, and kind of reserve that base functionality for them. So what it does is it flags that, you can imagine if I have an order and the person who's tracking the order has indicated that it's shipped and all this, there's a status that says, well, the order's shipped, I should expect an invoice of this. And that's where we turn it over to the finance team to record the invoice, run the receipt, and then book the AR that we're waiting for.
I like that.
Yeah.
The PO, Are you actually using the mark for PO checkbox on the sales order? So there's that link between the two?
Yeah, so that the links are always from the project to the quote to the sales order, which in that case has the purchase orders to the tracking and to the receipts. So all of that information is completely linked up, regardless up and down the chain, um, which is again proven there's transparency here at Cesco that they never had before.
Yeah, all in one system. So
Right.
finance sounds like the last piece of the puzzle here on what you've done so far. And even, I guess, what you're doing right now with finance, it sounds like a fair amount of customization, but mostly upfront. I would assume finance then will mostly be native functionality.
Yeah, a lot of it's native. There's a couple of big pieces, let's say a handful that we had to customize for what we do. But for the most part, it's using a lot of out-of-the-box functionality with tweaks here and there. So it's pretty exciting. And then once they're on, then we have our complete end-to-end process, and we're already integrating. I kind of have taken it on myself to learn a lot about generic inquiries, which I think are the single greatest thing in Acumatica. I would recommend any customer to learn how to use them because the benefit of Acumatica is any data you put in, you can get out as long as you know how to write a GI. And that's helped me tremendously, not only with, at least on the operation side, building all the visibility I need to help troubleshoot issues, but also start building proactive dashboards. I'm a big fan of daily management of leading KPIs, and I can build them now in dashboards and present them to the team so that we can try to fix problems before they go to accounting.
I love it. Preaching to the choir there. I echo that 100%.
Yeah, if I have any like lucky, fortunate thing was falling into this GI, like understanding how to use it and then kind of just running with it. And I think that's been one of the greatest things to help Cesco, at least, and myself, at least build views tailored to the job function for what they're really trying to do in a way that they don't, my vision at Cesco is no one ever has to run a report. These views are there and dynamic to do and complement what they're trying to do. And I think it's been great so far.
I'm wiping away the tear from my eye. That sounds beautiful. No reports.
No, I mean, obviously we also, and now I've gotten to a point where I'm trying to explore additional functionality around. I've been, this back half of the year now, I'm really focused on using tasks, manage the business processes we have internally to help support quotes or get requests and build dashboards of tasks. And that's where it's been, if I can start unlocking that piece of it, that's my next big win.
Yeah, and a sales organization, tasks, activity tracking, that sounds like it'd be a huge win.
Mm-hmm.
What about other third-party tools? Did you do any ISV products, or was it just customizations that you did to the core?
Yeah, right now we're still exploring a couple of them. I know we've invested in a tool, and I had it written down, Tim. I think it's called Profix.
That BI tool?
I'm sorry?
A report?
Yeah, it's a report tool for finance.
Yeah.
So my counterpart, the CFO, Melody, I know we've invested in that, so we're really excited. That's another reason we're very excited and eager to get live.
Yeah.
So my counterpart, the CFO, Melody, I know we've invested in that, so we're really excited. That's another reason we're very excited and eager to get live, because then we start unlocking all that work on the profit side. And so I think we've only really explored those for now. I think we're evaluating some other tools to kind of expand. Some of the other decisions, Tim, that's going to happen at Cesco is now how pervasive does Acumatica become, right? We have an entire HR group, payroll, IT assets, there's going to be something there. And I know we're still trying to decide, again, how far.
How many spreadsheets do you eliminate? There's always some that remain, right? Yeah,
absolutely.
How far are you going to take it?
Yeah, and I think our next logical thing is looking at, we have an entire, not only do we do product sales on behalf of manufacturers, but we have our own team that does on behalf of manufacturers, but we have our own team that does, um, if you have involved controls, for example, light changing panels and all this at a business, we have an own group that does what we call turn on services or field services for those, looking at the service module in Acumatica, for example. So you can imagine in that realm of sales orders to purchase orders, that a line could become a service order. One single line could be that, and I kind of started exploring some of that there to see what we would need as a company.
That makes sense. Circling back to a dashboard, just because I like dashboards, I always like asking, was that something that you tackled during the implementation or after go live, once you actually had data flowing in the system?
And so, again, I'll joke with the big capital letters in my notebook. The challenge with dashboards is the dashboards that are sent with Acumatica are great, because I think the challenge there, Tim, was we had to launch those after we went live. Because once we went live with a couple, let's say, branches that started getting enough data, the uptick of dashboard usage just took off, because again, this was something people never had before. And it was data that they could relate to and drill down on. And I think that's where, if I could have any things I learned from, well, I hope I'm not doing this again soon, but if I could learn from anything would be, or advice to give to somebody, is if you have a test system, which we did, try to make sure that test system has real recognizable data by end users. Not just, it's easy for us to use in the test system fake data to just validate that functionality works. But one of the biggest things I underestimated was having recognizable data, so that not only could I validate the functionality, but somebody else looking at it could understand and apply it to what they're doing.
Yeah, and then on the reporting side as well, having something that makes sense to them.
Absolutely.
Especially on the reporting side, I find that you really want to do it as part of the implementation. You really should, in theory. It's just practically speaking, a lot of times it doesn't happen until after the true data is in there. Even if you can get that as much sample data as you can also run into a problem with that approach, because you can get too hung up on the data conversion before go live, right? So I find practically speaking, dashboards tend not to come until after go live, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's hindsight always is 2020. I mean, when you're in the moment and you're trying to balance functionality, speed, adoption, training, you definitely make trade-offs, and easily dashboards are the first ones to go.
Well, it sounds like you survived, and as you said, hopefully you're not doing this soon. Hopefully you get to shift into analytics mode and start now really improving the business with the data you have at your fingertips. Absolutely. You said finance will be the next one. What's your goal for finance? I'm curious. I think you might have said it already, but
we're hoping by the end of the year, so that when we're trying to gear up so that when 2021 finally comes around, and we are in position now to really capitalize with the investment we made on this whole system. And I think incrementally, there's a lot of things we're doing here. I did not mention that we also have now partnered with DocuPhase as well. I didn't mention that for the order side. So if I plan that out now, by 2021 coming in, we're going to have some pretty, I would say, slick tools to help us really make our business. And at the end of the day, all we're trying to do is make us more efficient to support our sales team in a greater way.
Are you doing anything on the payment side, with dealing with COVID and check payments becoming more and more difficult? When you're a manufacturer's rep, I would assume you've got the payments flowing from the customer to you, back to the rep. What are you doing on the electronic payment side? Anything yet?
That obviously, I would say, Tim, I can't answer right now. I know Melody on her side has been doing some work there. But I know there is some, we've had to do some work there on an investment side to do some customizations to process the payments, because the number of payments we get or the number of check transactions, and I want to use my words correctly here, are pretty high in nature. So one of the big customizations we've had to do on the accounting side is actually this processing software to make sure things get routed correctly. Because the last thing we want to do is not pay one of our sales reps correctly, and that's just not good, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, I'd be interested to hear how that turns out. You've got a lot of margin stuff going on, both with the reps and with the manufacturers themselves, right?
Yeah.
I would assume they're
Like
payments connected to payment.
yeah. As a rep, we're always balancing, the distributor, the people purchasing, and then the manufacturers, and kind of keeping track of money and who owes who what, and sitting on top of a lot of those transactions. So absolutely.
Sounds like you have more capital letters and fun ahead of you.
I got another notebook ready to go.
Well, I love diving into these kind of details. Before we wrap it up here, anything else that you wanted to share you could think of?
No, I think if I can speak to some of the other customers you out, but as a customer, I would really take some of the training classes. I think, a lot of times we look at ERP systems as big, scary things. And if I've learned anything, I think once I got into this, by understanding a little bit more about how Acumatica works, has helped me tremendously be a partner to work with our partners in a more effective way. And then also really, at the end of the day, help speed up our implementation. And even, I would like to say, and maybe if my boss is listening, make it better. And more efficient. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's helped us all out as a company, and it's an investment that has tremendous returns as a customer.
You definitely strike me as a roll up your sleeves kind of person, and that's great advice. I appreciate that.
Thanks.
And thanks for coming on today. Thanks for taking the time.
Well, thank you. Appreciate the time to kind of share something we're really proud of here at Cesco Lighting.
All right. Well, that's it for now. We'll catch you on the next episode of AUGforums.com Real Talk.